talk about the overhead crack. Make sure you're always thinking about what your hands are doing. So, first of all, as you bring your whip around, your palm is down. When you bring the whip back, even though you have to lift it a little bit to go over your head, it's still palm down when you finish. So always be thinking about the position of your hand. Most people make a very ugly S shape with the whip because they're afraid of hitting themselves. So as the whip comes over their head, their elbow drops and their wrist comes back, and then they finish. You want to try to keep it as much like a salute as you can. You bring the whip over your head and forward. Obviously it's going to go over your head just a little bit, that's the S, but don't overdo it with the S or the whip will make a very funny shape. The secret to making this crack look really great is understanding this shape. When you throw the whip forward, this part of the whip, the part closer to your hand, is going to be on an angle. It's going to be diagonal. But you want the upper part of the whip, the part that's flowing forward, to be as flat as you can, almost like flat like a table. So you're going to get this shape. The whip can't really touch itself as much as you might want it to. It has to do this a little bit so that it can flow. What you don't want is to be like this. That's just a diagonal crack over the head. You want an overhead crack to be as flat as possible. As much as you can, you want to make this shape. If you can film yourself, look and see what your whip is doing. See if this part is at an angle and this part is flat. You got to play with it. You got to try thinking about where your elbow is going to go. Some people like to bring it up way over their head like this. But then I think that's a little too high, higher than you need. Try to keep your hands and elbow low, but just don't forget to bring it back down so when you throw the whip forward, you're still throwing it about chest high when it lands and straight out in front. This is what people do that tells me they're very afraid of the whip. They're throwing the whip off to the side. They're not getting anything very flat. They're just bringing it up slightly over their head and over on that side. In fact, it's not that much different than a cattleman's crack. It just sort of crosses over their head. What you want to do is make the whip as flat as you can so that you get a nice flat outreach straight into your target. So to review, make sure that your overhead crack is coming out as flat as possible. Use a shadow if you can with the sun behind you. Film yourself. You don't want to be thinking you're doing a nice clean overhead crack when in fact you're just doing a sloppy, slightly diagonal cattleman's crack. Keep your hand flat. This is going to account for the diagonal part of the whip near your hand, but hopefully as you throw it out, the whip will straighten itself out and be very flat. Have a good time and practice.
I'm a tireless